I got pregnant by my daughter's ex and then had an abortion. They got back together and got married. It was 2002, and I was 35, still living in the same small Indiana town where I'd spent my whole life. My daughter, Emily, had just turned 18 and was getting ready to start college. She was my whole world, the one bright spot in a life I'd spent fumbling through. But if I'm honest, I wasn't the mother she deserved. I'd been battling an addiction to alcohol for years. It started when her dad left us, back when Emily was barely a toddler. At first, it was a drink at night to help me sleep. Then it was a drink in the morning to steady my nerves. Before I knew it, it was the only thing holding me together. By the time Emily hit her teenage years, I was more of a roommate than a parent, and not a very good one at that. When Emily started dating Ryan, a 24-year-old mechanic, I didn't like it. He was too old for her, for one thing, and he had this slick confidence that put me on edge. But I didn't say anything. What right did I have to judge? My life was a mess, and Emily was doing everything she could to get out of it. Ryan, though, he had a way of getting under your skin. He was charming, in a way that felt a little too practiced, and he had this knack for making you feel special. I saw it with Emily, how her face lit up when he walked into the room. But I also saw the cracks, the way his attention would drift, how he'd make little digs that didn't seem like much, but left her questioning herself. They were together for a few months before Emily called it off. She didn't say much about why, just that she'd realized they weren't right for each other. I was relieved, but didn't press her for details. She was busy getting ready to leave for college, throwing herself into packing and making plans with her new roommate. I thought that would be the end of Ryan, but I was wrong. He didn't go away. A few weeks after Emily and Ryan broke up, I figured that was the last we'd see of him. Emily was busy with college prep, and Ryan seemed like the type to move on quickly. But then one evening, I heard a knock at the door. When I opened it, there he was, Ryan, standing on the porch with his hands shoved in his jacket pockets. "Hey," he said, his voice low. "Is Emily here?" "No," I said, keeping my hand on the door frame. "She's out with friends. You should probably just leave her alone." "I'm not here to bother her," he said quickly. I wanted to talk to you." I hesitated. There was something about the way he said it, soft, almost apologetic, that made me pause. Against my better judgment, I stepped back and let him in. He didn't stay long that first night. He sat on the edge of the couch, fidgeting with the hem of his jacket while he talked about how much he missed Emily, how he didn't know what to do with himself now that she was gone. I listened, mostly out of politeness, nodding along and offering vague reassurances. But then, just as he was getting up to leave, he said something that made my stomach twist. "You know," he said, his voice quiet, "Emily doesn't realize how lucky she is to have you." You're amazing." I laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. "Amazing? You must not know me very well." "I mean it," he said, his eyes locking onto mine. "You're different. You get it." I brushed him off, but his words stayed with me long after he'd left. It had been years since anyone had said something like that to me, since anyone had noticed me at all. A few days later, Ryan called. He said he wanted to check in, to see how I was doing. It was a small thing, but it hit me harder than it should have. Emily was busy with her new life, and I hadn't heard from her in days. The house felt emptier than ever. When Ryan asked if I wanted to grab a drink, I said yes before I could think better of it. We met at a bar on the edge of town, the kind of place where no one asks questions. It was supposed to be a one-time thing, just a drink, just a conversation. But one drink turned into two, then three, and before I knew it, we were back at his truck, our faces inches apart. When he kissed me, I didn't stop him. The next morning, I woke up with a pounding headache and a sinking feeling in my chest. I told myself it was a mistake, that it wouldn't happen again. But it did. Over the next few weeks, Ryan kept finding reasons to see me. He'd call late at night, sounding lost, and I'd let him talk me into meeting him. We'd sit in his truck or at some out-of-the-way diner, drinking and talking until we crossed that line again. I hated myself for it. Every time it happened, I swore it would be the last. But Ryan had this way of making me feel seen, like I wasn't just some washed-up drunk trying to get through the day. And I was too weak to walk away. Then I missed my period. The day I realized I was late, I went into denial. It wasn't like I was keeping track. I barely kept track of my life, let alone my cycle. But as the days dragged on, that gnawing pit in my stomach grew harder to ignore. I finally bought a test one afternoon while I was supposed to be cleaning a client's house. I stuffed it into my purse like it was something shameful, which, honestly, it felt like it was. When the test came back positive, I stared at it for what felt like an eternity. My mind raced with 1,000 questions I couldn't answer. What was I supposed to do? Tell Ryan? Tell Emily? Keep it? Get rid of it? I didn't have any answers, only the overwhelming realization that my life was about to implode. That night, Ryan came over. I couldn't look him in the eye. You okay? He asked, his brow furrowed as he set a six-pack on the counter. Yeah, I said quickly, avoiding his gaze. Just tired. He didn't press me, which only made me feel worse. For the next week, I carried the secret around like a stone in my chest. I kept going through the motions, cleaning houses, pretending everything was fine, drinking myself numb at the end of the day. But the weight of it was suffocating. Eventually, I made the decision. I couldn't have this baby. My life was a mess, and bringing a child into it wasn't just unfair, it was cruel. And telling Ryan? That wasn't an option. I scheduled the appointment at a clinic 2 towns over, far enough that no one would recognize me. On the day of, I told Ryan I had errands to run and drove myself there, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. The procedure was quick, but the shame lingered. As I sat in the recovery room, staring at the beige walls, I promised myself that this would be the end of it. No more Ryan. No more lying to Emily. No more drinking myself into oblivion to escape the mess I'd made of my life. When I got home, Ryan called. Hey, he said, his voice warm. I was thinking about you today. Thought maybe we could hang out. I can't, I said, my throat tight. I think we need to stop seeing each other. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Is this about Emily? It's about everything, I said. This isn't right, Ryan. It's not good for either of us. He didn't argue, didn't push the way he sometimes did. He just said, okay, take care of yourself. When I hung up, I felt relief, but it was tangled with regret. I'd cut him out of my life, but the damage was already done. Cutting Ryan out of my life should have felt like a victory, but it didn't. It left me hollow, raw. I'd poured so much into him, not love, exactly, but desperation, and now I had to face what was left of me. The weight of what I'd done stayed with me, and the only way I knew how to carry it was at the bottom of a bottle. For a while, I kept myself together just enough to get through each day. I worked my cleaning jobs, avoided the bars where I used to drink with Ryan, and made sure to pick up whenever Emily called. College was everything she'd hoped it would be. Every Sunday, she'd tell me about her classes, her friends, and the professors who were changing the way she saw the world. She was thriving in ways I couldn't even imagine for myself. I think I finally found where I belong, she said one evening, her voice buzzing with excitement. You sound happy, I told her, and I meant it. It gave me some comfort to know that no matter how badly I'd failed as a mother, she'd made it out okay. Months passed, and slowly, the pieces of my life started to come together. I managed to cut back on drinking, still not sober, but no longer blacking out on the couch every night. I even took on more cleaning jobs, saving a little extra money here and there. I didn't hear from Ryan again, which was both a relief and a reminder of how much damage I'd done. Every time I thought about him, I felt that familiar wave of guilt and shame. I didn't tell anyone, not even my oldest friends. Some secrets, I figured, were better left buried. But life doesn't let you bury things forever. It had been nearly a year since I last saw Ryan. The memories of him still lingered, but I'd gotten better at pushing them to the back of my mind. Emily, meanwhile, was thriving in college. Every phone call with her was filled with stories of new friends, tough classes, and late-night adventures that made me both proud and nervous. One evening, she called me out of the blue. Hey, Mom, she said, her voice light and casual. You're not going to believe who I ran into today. My chest tightened. I don't know why, but I had a feeling I didn't like where this was going. Who? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Ryan," she said, as if she were talking about an old high school friend. "Can you believe it? He was visiting his cousin on campus, and we bumped into each other at the coffee shop." I froze, gripping the phone so tightly it felt like it might crack. "Oh," I managed to say. "That's unexpected." "I know," she said, laughing softly. We sat and talked for a while. "He's doing really well, got a promotion at the shop, and he's thinking about going back to school." It was nice catching up with him. I'd forgotten how easy he is to talk to. I felt a lump rise in my throat. "Did you? Are you planning to see him again?" "Maybe," she said, her voice hesitant. "It's not like that, Mom. We're just friends." "But I don't know, he seemed different. Like he's really grown up." I wanted to scream, to tell her everything. But what could I say? That her ex-boyfriend, the guy she was thinking about letting back into her life, was the same man I'd been secretly involved with, the same man whose child I'd almost brought into the world. Instead, I forced a smile into my voice. "Well, I'm glad you had a good time. Just be careful, okay?" "Of course," she said, brushing me off. "Don't worry, Mom. I know what I'm doing." But I wasn't so sure. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat on the couch with a bottle of whiskey, staring at the blank TV screen and replaying Emily's words over and over in my head. He seemed different. Like he's really grown up. The thought of them rekindling their relationship made my stomach turn. But the worst part was knowing I had no one to blame but myself. For weeks after Emily's phone call, I felt like I was walking around with a time bomb strapped to my chest. Every time the phone rang or a text from her popped up, my pulse quickened, waiting for the moment she'd tell me something I wasn't ready to hear. That moment came sooner than I expected. It was a Saturday afternoon, and I was scrubbing the kitchen floor when the phone buzzed on the counter. I wiped my hands on a towel and picked it up, seeing Emily's name on the screen. "Hey, Mom," she said, her voice unusually cheerful. "So, I have some news." I sat down, bracing myself. "What's up?" "Ryan and I are back together," she said, her voice full of cautious excitement. For a second, I couldn't breathe. I felt the air rush out of my lungs like I'd been punched. "Oh," I finally managed. "Wow, that's big news." "I know," she said quickly, as if she could sense my hesitation. "I know it might seem sudden, but we've been talking a lot. He's really changed, Mom. He's not the same guy he was before." I wanted to tell her that I knew all too well how much he hadn't changed. That he was still the same man who'd sat in my living room, who'd kissed me, who'd gotten me pregnant. But instead, I bit my tongue. "Well," I said, forcing a smile into my voice, "if you're happy, that's all that matters." "I really think I am," she said, her voice soft. "I know we've had our ups and downs, but this time feels different. He's been so patient and kind. I just feel like we're in a good place now." "I'm glad," I said, even though my heart was breaking. After we hung up, I poured myself a drink and sat at the kitchen table, staring at the floor I'd just cleaned. The thought of them together made my stomach churn. I pictured them holding hands, laughing, making plans for the future, all the things I'd thrown away when I ended things with Ryan. The worst part was knowing I had to pretend to be happy for her. I couldn't tell her the truth, not without risking everything. Over the next few months, Ryan became a regular topic of conversation. Emily would call me and tell me about their dates, the little surprises he planned, the way he made her feel special. Each time, I nodded along, trying to muster enthusiasm while guilt gnawed at me from the inside out. Then, one evening, Emily dropped the biggest bombshell yet. "Mom," she said, her voice trembling with excitement, "Ryan proposed." And I said yes. I froze, the phone slipping in my hand. "You're getting married?" "Yes," she said, laughing nervously. "I know it's fast, but I really feel like this is right. He's changed so much, Mom." "I think he's the one." I forced out a laugh, though it felt like my chest was caving in. "Congratulations, honey. I'm happy for you." But inside, I was screaming. After Emily announced her engagement to Ryan, I felt like I was living in a nightmare of my own making. Every conversation with her was a tightrope walk, Every smile I gave her an effort to mask the storm raging inside me. She started coming home more often, eager to share wedding plans. She'd sit at the kitchen table, flipping through bridal magazines and talking about venues and dresses while I nodded along, gripping my coffee cup so tightly I thought it might crack. "I want something simple," she said one day, her eyes bright with excitement. "Just family and close friends. Nothing too big." I smiled weakly. "That sounds perfect. And I want you to walk me down the aisle," she added, reaching out to squeeze my hand. The gesture nearly broke me. "Of course," I said, swallowing the lump in my throat. The worst part came when Ryan started coming around again. The first time he walked through my door as Emily's fiancé, I thought I might collapse. He looked almost the same as I remembered, clean-shaven, wearing that same charming smile that had fooled me before. "Good to see you again," he said, extending a hand like we were strangers. I shook it, forcing a polite smile. "You too." If he felt any discomfort, he didn't show it. He played his part perfectly, sitting next to Emily on the couch and chatting with her about their wedding plans like nothing had ever happened between us. It was almost worse than the guilt, this act, this charade we both had to keep up for Emily's sake. Every time he looked at me, I wondered if he was thinking about the past. One evening, while Emily was out running errands, Ryan stayed behind to help me move some furniture. We worked in tense silence. He finally broke it. "You've been quiet," he said, not looking at me. I didn't respond, focusing on sliding the heavy couch into place. "I didn't think I'd ever see you again," he added. "That was the idea," I said sharply, wiping my hands on my jeans. He sighed, leaning against the armrest. "Look, I didn't plan for this either. I never wanted to hurt anyone." "Don't," I snapped, turning to face him. "Don't you dare pretend this is some kind of accident. You made your choices. So did I. But she doesn't know, and she can't ever know. Understand?" Ryan nodded, his expression unreadable. "I'd never tell her. I'd never hurt her like that." "Good," I said, my voice trembling. "Because if she finds out, it'll destroy her. And it'll destroy me." After that conversation, I avoided being alone with him as much as possible. I threw myself into helping Emily plan the wedding, channeling all my energy into making her happy. It was the only thing I could do, the only way I could atone for what I'd done, but no matter how hard I tried to bury the past, it hung over me like a shadow, a constant reminder that some mistakes can never be undone. The day of Emily and Ryan's wedding arrived faster than I expected, though every moment leading up to it had felt like an eternity. The ceremony was small and intimate, just as Emily had wanted: family, close friends, a modest setup in a picturesque park on the outskirts of town. I sat in the front row, my hands clasped tightly in my lap as the music began to play. Emily appeared at the end of the aisle, radiant in a simple white dress, her face glowing with happiness. I felt tears sting my eyes, but they weren't the kind of tears I'd wanted to shed for her on her wedding day. When she reached me, I stood and took her arm. She smiled up at me, her eyes full of love and trust, and it was all I could do to hold myself together. "You look beautiful," I whispered. "Thanks, Mom," she said, squeezing my arm. "I'm so glad you're here with me." Her words nearly shattered me. The ceremony passed in a blur. I barely heard the vows, barely registered the exchange of rings. All I could see was Ryan, standing there with the same confident smile he'd worn the first time he stepped into my life. And now, he was stepping into Emily's for good. When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, the crowd erupted into cheers. I clapped along, forcing a smile as they kissed and walked back down the aisle, hand in hand. The reception, Emily was glowing. She danced with Ryan, laughed with her friends, and beamed at the speeches. "Mom," she said at one point, pulling me aside. "Thank you for everything. I couldn't have done this without you." I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. "You deserve all the happiness in the world," I said, and I meant it, even if it came at my own expense. As the night wound down, I watched from a distance as Emily and Ryan shared a private moment, his hand on her back, her head resting on his shoulder. They looked so happy, so perfect together. And for a brief moment, I let myself believe that maybe, just maybe, I'd made the right choice, because the truth was, I'd never forgive myself for what I'd done. But Emily didn't know. And as long as she didn't, she could hold on to the life she deserved, the life I couldn't give her. Some secrets, I realized, weren't meant to be told. When I left the reception, the air was cool and quiet, the stars just starting to come out. I walked to my car, the weight of everything pressing down on me. As I started the engine, I glanced back at the venue one last time, seeing the faint outline of Emily and Ryan through the windows. Then I drove away, leaving them to their new life together, and leaving my past behind for good.
What would you do in a similar situation? Share your opinion in the comments.